Have you ever noticed that sometimes the person who speaks the least commands the most attention? They don't interrupt. They don't seek the spotlight. They don't posture or perform. But when they walk into a room, something shifts. Not because they're trying to impress, but because they don't need to. That's the quiet power most people never understand. We live in a world that rewards noise. Post louder, talk faster, market yourself harder. But the Stoics knew something the world forgot. That real power isn't loud, it's rooted. It's not about being the most liked, it's about being the most aligned. And that kind of presence, calm, steady, unshaken, doesn't come from achievement, it comes from within. Maybe that's what drew you here. Maybe you've started to feel the exhaustion that comes from chasing approval, the emptiness of performing every day just to feel enough, the quiet pull to live a different kind of life, one built not on image but on integrity. That's where this story begins. Not with tactics, not with tips, but with a deeper question. What would it look like to stop proving, to stop performing, to live every day with quiet confidence, the kind that doesn't need to shout to be felt? This is what the Stoics mastered. And in a world like ours, where everyone's screaming to be seen, that mastery might just be your greatest superpower. So let's take a breath, let's slow down, and let's begin the journey inward, towards something unshakable, toward the kind of strength that doesn't need permission, the kind that speaks, even in silence. It usually begins in the small moments, the kind no one else notices. You're in a conversation and someone interrupts you. Instead of fighting for space, you pause, you listen, you speak when the room quiets. Or you're at a social gathering, and instead of trying to impress, you simply observe. You let your presence speak instead of your mouth. Most people rush to fill silence. They panic at the thought of being overlooked, but a person with quiet confidence doesn't mind being overlooked because he knows he sees himself clearly. He doesn't need validation. He values alignment more than approval. This is the heart of Stoicism. It teaches you to build your identity on what you control, your thoughts, your choices, your responses, not on the shifting opinions of others. You don't need to announce your worth. You need to live it. That changes everything. Because the moment you stop trying to be impressive is the moment you become magnetic. People lean into your calm. They feel your groundedness. They sense that you're not here to win them over. You're just here to be real. And in a world starving for authenticity, that's rare. But let's be honest, getting to this place isn't easy. It takes restraint not to argue when you're misunderstood. It takes strength to walk away from drama that tempts your ego. It takes clarity to stay quiet when being loud might win you the spotlight. But that's the discipline the Stoics trained for. They didn't react, they chose. They didn't chase, they attracted. They didn't prove, they aligned. Epictetus once said, if someone speaks badly of you, live so that no one believes it. That's not about image, that's about integrity. That's about becoming the kind of person who doesn't need to fight back because their life already speaks for them. So the next time you feel the urge to prove something, stop, breathe, step back. Ask yourself, do I need to say this or do I need to be this? Because that one question separates the man who needs attention from the man who already has presence. And presence, my friend, is felt, not forced. There's a moment that every grounded man faces, the test of rejection. It doesn't always come with cruelty or conflict. Sometimes it's just silence, a message left unanswered, an idea dismissed, a connection that fades without explanation, and the first instinct to chase, to prove, to explain why you're enough. But that's where the work begins, the inner work, the Stoic work, because rejection in its rawest form is not about you being unworthy. It's about the world reminding you that you can't control outcomes, only your response. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." That truth applies here. When rejection comes, you don't crumble, you don't collapse into self-doubt or bitterness. You pause, you recalibrate. You choose who you become in that moment. That's quiet strength. You don't beg to be chosen because you've already chosen yourself. That doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop over-giving where care is not respected. You stop over-explaining where your truth is not heard. You stop overextending where your energy is drained. And that, strangely, is when people start paying attention. Not because you fought harder, but because you walked away softer, with dignity intact, with energy unshaken. That's presence. That's the kind of man who's not afraid to be alone. And because of that, he rarely is. When you respond to rejection with quiet clarity instead of emotional chaos, you reveal something rare. A man who is whole on his own. A man who doesn't collapse when the door closes, but simply turns and finds another one, and slowly, quietly, something shifts. People begin to notice that you're not thrown by life's turbulence. You're steady. You don't need the crowd. You don't need the echo. You just need your values and your path. Because a man who walks with his values is never really walking alone. There's a kind of power that doesn't show up in noise, but in restraint. You're in an argument. Someone pushes. They want a reaction. They want to see you flinch, defend, explode. But you don't. You pause. You breathe. You stay still. Not because you're weak, but because you're strong enough not to be pulled into chaos that isn't yours. That's real strength. Not the kind that needs to win, but the kind that doesn't need to fight every battle. The Stoics understood this better than anyone. Seneca wrote, "He who angers you conquers you." And so they trained themselves not to be conquered, not by rage, not by fear, not even by the ego's hunger to be right. They chose peace, not because it's passive, but because it's powerful. Because in every moment of tension, there's a choice. You can react or you can respond. You can escalate or you can observe. You can lose yourself or you can return to yourself. That's what presence really is. It's not about being perfect. It's about being aware. It's about noticing the storm in your chest and still choosing your values over your impulses. And when people see that in you, when they see that you won't be dragged into drama, that you won't rise to every bait, they don't see weakness. They see a man they can trust. Because if you can stay steady in conflict, you can be steady in life. This is the kind of person we all secretly want around. Someone who doesn't add fuel to the fire. Someone who holds the line. Someone who isn't easily moved, but deeply rooted. So the next time you're pulled into the heat of the moment, pause. Ask yourself, is this battle worth my peace? Is this noise worth my presence? And then with quiet clarity, walk the higher path. Not because it's easy, but because it's yours. There's a calm that only comes from knowing you're living in alignment. Not perfection, not performance, but alignment between your words and your actions, your values and your choices. Most people live in fragments. They say one thing, do another. They chase goals that don't fulfill them. They say yes when they mean no. They pretend to be who they think the world wants and lose themselves in the process. But the man who knows his values and lives by them walks differently. He doesn't hustle to be accepted. He doesn't bend to be liked. He doesn't perform to belong, because he already belongs to himself. That's what the Stoics practice daily. Not rules, not rigidity, but a quiet return to inner alignment. Marcus Aurelius didn't try to impress the Senate. He asked himself, am I living according to nature? Am I fulfilling my role with integrity? That's it. And in a world obsessed with image, that kind of self-honesty is rare. But here's the beauty of alignment. It simplifies everything. You stop negotiating your truth for temporary approval. You stop chasing things that pull you away from yourself. You stop performing and start living. And that shift, it's felt. People trust a man who's at peace with himself. You can feel it in how he walks into a room, how he says no without guilt, how he doesn't explain his boundaries, how he listens more than he talks. He's not trying to prove he's powerful, because he's already living powerfully. You don't have to have it all figured out to begin walking that path. You just have to start asking better questions. Does this feel right for me? Am I honoring my truth in this moment? Would the person I respect be proud of this choice? When your life starts to answer those questions consistently, quietly, humbly, something changes. You move through life without needing applause, because peace becomes your proof, and integrity becomes your compass. That's not the loud path, but it's the real one, and it always leads you home. At some point, you'll face a moment when everything feels uncertain. Plans fall apart, people let you down. The road you thought was yours suddenly disappears beneath your feet. And in that moment, the world will expect you to panic, to scramble, to shout, to seek someone, anyone, to blame. But you don't. You sit with the silence. You stand in the wreckage. And instead of asking, why me? You ask, what now? That's the Stoic way. It's not about avoiding hardship, it's about how you carry yourself through it. Because life won't always be fair, but your response, that's where your power lives. Seneca said, difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body. And he meant it. Every test, every heartbreak, every loss is not just something to survive, it's something that refines you. Not instantly, not dramatically, but quietly, the way a mountain is shaped by time, not force. And when you choose to walk through pain with presence, not denial, not distraction, you come out the other side with a strength that doesn't shake. You realize that clarity lives on the other side of chaos, that resilience is not some gift you're born with. It's built, moment by moment, through the fire. This is the core of Stoic confidence, not being untouched by life, but being unbroken by it. So when the storm hits, don't reach for the quick fix. Don't numb it. Don't rush through it. Stand still. Feel it fully. Learn what it came to teach you. And when others look to you, searching for direction in the darkness, you'll be the one who doesn't flinch. Not because you've mastered life, but because you've mastered presence. And that presence, steady, grounded, unshaken, will be your legacy. In the end, it always comes back to this. Who are you when no one is watching? Not when you're performing, not when you're posting, not when you're surrounded by noise or praise or pressure, but in the quiet, in the stillness, in the moments that never make it to the outside world. That's where character is built. Not in the spotlight, but in the shadows. Not in what people see, but in what you live. The Stoics understood this deeply. They weren't obsessed with perception. They were devoted to principle. They asked themselves again and again, am I being honest? Am I being just? Am I staying true to my nature? Because in the long run, the world forgets noise. It forgets moments of brilliance. It forgets the loudest man in the room. But it remembers the man who moved with quiet conviction, the one who didn't need to shout to be trusted, who didn't need applause to stay the course, who didn't trade his soul for attention. That's the man who leaves a mark, not because he tried to, but because he lived so clearly, so consistently, that people couldn't forget the calm he carried. So if you take one thing from all of this, let it be this: presence is power, but not the kind that needs to dominate, the kind that listens, the kind that waits, the kind that doesn't waver when others do. Because in 2025 and beyond, when the world is louder than ever, it's the quiet ones who will stand out. The ones who don't chase trends, but live by truth. The ones who don't seek validation, but move from values. The ones who walk into a room and change it without saying a word. That can be you, not by becoming someone else, but by becoming more fully who you already are, underneath the noise, the pressure, the fear. So walk quietly, live deeply, and let the strength of your presence say everything you don't need to. Because the deepest attraction, the kind that lingers long after the moment ends, isn't built on words. It's built on energy, on consistency, on how a person feels when they're around you. Not impressed, not overwhelmed, but safe, seen, understood. That's what happens when you carry quiet confidence. People don't just notice you, they remember how they felt with you, grounded, calmer, more honest with themselves. And that, more than charisma or charm or clever lines, is what changes relationships. It's what builds trust. It's what makes others lean in, not because you pulled them, but because you drew them in through presence. Think about the most influential people you've ever met. Were they loud, or were they calm? Were they trying to impress, or were they simply living in alignment? You probably remember the way they looked at you, steady, focused, the way they listened, fully, the way they spoke, slowly, with weight, as if their words weren't just filling space, but creating it. That's who you can become, not by pretending, not by performing, but by returning again and again to your values. Because when your words, your actions, your tone, and your energy all speak the same language, people trust you, even if they don't know why. That's the invisible power of quiet confidence. It doesn't need to be seen to be felt. It doesn't need a spotlight to shine. It doesn't chase impact, but it always leaves one. So keep showing up, not louder, but deeper, not flashier, but truer. Because in a world that's always reaching for more, the most powerful move you can make is to be still and let who you are do the talking. So how do you build it? How do you become the kind of man whose presence speaks before he does? You begin small. You begin inward. You begin by choosing alignment over appearance, again and again. You wake up and ask, what matters today? Not what will impress, not what will get approval, but what feels right, what feels true. You start keeping promises to yourself. You show up on time, not because someone's watching, but because it reflects who you are. You speak less, but when you do, it matters more. You listen more, not to reply, but to understand. You set boundaries, not to push people away, but to protect your peace. You rest, not out of laziness, but out of respect for your body. You move slowly, not because you lack ambition, but because you're no longer rushing to prove your worth. And over time, something shifts. You stop overthinking your every move. You stop reacting to every glance or comment. You stop needing to be chosen because you've already chosen yourself. That kind of self-respect doesn't arrive with a bang. It builds quietly in every moment you choose integrity over image. And eventually, others feel it in how you enter a room, in how you hold eye contact, in how you carry yourself when no one's clapping and when everyone's watching. They'll wonder what it is about you, why they feel safer around you, why your presence calms the noise in the room. And the truth is, it's not about tactics. It's not about playing games. It's not even about being impressive. It's about being real. The kind of real that doesn't need to be explained. The kind that lives in your tone, your posture, your silence. That's the legacy of a Stoic life. Not applause, not spotlight, but quiet impact. So if you're wondering where to start here. Keep your word. Stay calm when others react. Let your presence speak louder than your opinions. Live like someone is always watching, not out of fear, but out of honor. Because someone is watching, and that someone is you. This is how quiet confidence becomes who you are. Not something you wear, but something you embody. It's in the way you handle pressure without cracking, the way you say no without guilt, the way you let others have their noise while you keep your peace. It's not about being perfect. It's about being present, fully, honestly, humbly. And maybe somewhere along this path, people start to ask you for advice, not because you told them you had the answers, but because you live like you've wrestled with the questions. That's what makes your presence powerful. You're not pretending to be unshakable. You've just stood in the storm long enough to know it won't define you. You've made peace with being misunderstood. You've stopped explaining yourself to people committed to mishearing you. You've learned to walk away from anything that costs your peace, even if it looks like success. That's strength. The Stoics didn't chase legacy. They lived values, and in doing so, they became legends. You don't need to shout to be remembered. You don't need to dominate to be respected. You just need to align moment by moment with the man you've decided to be. And if you fail, good. That means you're trying. That means you're awake. That means you're growing. The difference now is you return faster. You recover wiser. You walk forward again, but with more clarity than before. So here's how we close. Don't chase the room. Let the room feel your presence. Don't chase applause. Let your life echo your values. Don't chase being unforgettable. Be undeniable. In your calm, in your strength, in your truth. Because the man who walks in quiet alignment, he doesn't need to be followed. He leads by simply being. And that's the final truth. All the noise, the likes, the comparisons, the pressure to be more, do more, show more, it fades. But what stays is you, your choices, your values, the way you treated people when no one else was around. That's the legacy of quiet confidence. Not in grand gestures, but in steady presence. Not in public victories, but in private discipline. Not in how loud your voice is, but in how clear your life sounds when you say nothing at all. So as the world keeps getting louder, you go the other way. You slow down, you listen deeper, you live cleaner, and every day you ask yourself, not did they notice me, but did I live in alignment today? Because when the lights fade, when the applause ends, when the world forgets your name, you will still be there. And if you've lived with quiet strength, calm purpose, and unwavering truth, that will be more than enough, more than impressive, more than popular, more than unforgettable. It will be real. It will be you. And that always is what leaves the deepest mark. So from this moment forward, let that be your compass. Not the craving to be seen, but the commitment to see clearly. Not the hunger to be desired, but the decision to be whole. You don't need to play louder games to win in a noisy world. You just need to walk with intention, to protect your peace like it's sacred, to show up with presence even when no one's paying attention. That's where real power lives, in the man who doesn't need permission to be grounded, in the man who isn't swayed by opinion but guided by principle, in the man who doesn't try to control others because he's mastered self-control. And that man, he's not a fantasy, he's not a myth, he's not a distant ideal. He's built by daily choices, by hard truths, by standing still when the world spins fast. That man can be you. So let your journey continue, not louder but deeper, not wider but wiser, not improving but in becoming. Because when the dust settles, when the voices fade, when all that's left is the man in the mirror, let him be someone you trust, someone you respect, someone you're proud to walk this life with. That's the quiet confidence the world never taught you. That's the presence it can never take away. And that, above all, is what it means to live free. And if you're wondering where to begin where you are. Not next week, not when you're more prepared, not when the world feels more ready to receive you. Right now. Start by noticing your own breath, the space between reaction and response, the tension in your body when something challenges your ego, the urge to prove yourself in moments that don't require proving, only presence. Start by doing one thing today that aligns with who you truly are. One small act of integrity. One silent decision to respect your time, your values, your peace. You don't need to announce it. You don't need to post about it. Just live it fully, quietly, deliberately. Because each aligned action is a vote for the man you are becoming. Each moment of restraint is a brick in the foundation of unshakable calm. Each time you choose depth over performance, you're stepping further into a life no one can take from you. That's how legacies are built, not all at once, but breath by breath, choice by choice, day by quiet day. So the next time you feel the urge to be louder, pause, let the moment pass through you. And remember, you're not here to perform, you're here to live aligned, to live awake, to live fully, and leave quietly, the kind of echo that doesn't fade. Because real power doesn't make noise, it makes impact. And you, when you live with quiet confidence, become the kind of man the world remembers without ever needing to raise your voice. And one day, without realizing it, you'll notice something shift. Not outside, but within. You'll walk into situations that once made you anxious and feel calm. You'll be misunderstood and feel no need to explain. You'll watch others seek validation and feel no pull to join them. Not because you've stopped caring, but because you've started centering. Your worth won't feel negotiable anymore. Your time won't feel disposable. Your presence won't be something you give away carelessly. And that's when you'll know you've stopped living from the outside in and started living from the inside out. No more performing, no more pretending, just presence. The quiet kind that fills a room without effort. The honest kind that earns trust without asking. The rare kind that doesn't need to compete because it already is. That's what the world is really starving for. Not more noise, not more shine, but people who are rooted. People who live with stillness in a stormy world. People who act with clarity when others react with fear. People who are unshakable, not because life is easy, but because their values are non-negotiable. You can be that man, and if you already are, keep going, because someone is watching, not out of judgment, but out of hope. They're wondering if it's possible to live with this kind of calm, to walk through fire and still carry peace, to lose, to break, to rebuild, and still stay whole. So be the proof, not by teaching, not by preaching, but by being. Let your life speak the language of quiet confidence. Let your presence remind the world that real power has no need to shout. And when you live this way long enough, something beautiful happens. You begin to attract differently. Not just people, but opportunities, energy, peace. Not the kind that rushes in with fireworks, but the kind that stays, that grows, that respects the man you've become. Because when you no longer crave attention, you command respect. When you no longer need validation, you gain influence. And when your identity is no longer up for negotiation, your life becomes unshakable. People will feel the difference. They'll feel safer around you, more honest with themselves in your presence. Not because you fixed them, but because you weren't trying to. You were just there, fully, clearly, quietly. A mirror for what's possible when a man chooses depth over noise. That's the paradox of quiet confidence. The less you chase, the more you receive. The less you speak, the more people listen. The less you try, the more you become. And so the journey continues. Not toward perfection, but toward alignment. Not toward applause, but toward truth. Not toward a persona, but toward presence. You will fall. You will forget. You will have days when the noise feels overwhelming again. But now you'll return faster. You'll breathe deeper. You'll remember who you are and who you're not. That's the mark of transformation. Not that you never get pulled off course, but that you know how to come home to yourself. So as the world keeps shouting for your attention, keep listening for that quieter voice within. The one that says, "This is who I am. This is what I stand for. This is the life I will live, no matter who's watching, no matter what it costs." And that voice, steady, unwavering, rooted in truth, will be the only guide you ever really needed. And in the quiet of that voice, you'll find something most men spend a lifetime chasing. Not success, not recognition, but peace. The kind of peace that doesn't come from things going right, but from knowing you're right within yourself. You'll stop looking over your shoulder, stop second-guessing your steps, stop waiting for the world to give you permission to feel whole, because you'll realize you've been whole all along. It just got buried beneath the noise, the proving, the pretending, and when you finally let go of that, you become dangerous in the best way, unshakable, unmoved, unreachable by the things that used to steal your sleep. And now you begin to lead, not from a stage, not from a title, but from example. You show others what it looks like to walk with calm in your chest, to carry stillness into rooms filled with noise, to live with so much clarity that chaos cannot confuse you. That's what men around you will remember. Not the words you said, not the things you built, but the energy you brought, the way you made them feel like they could be more honest with themselves, the way you reminded them, without ever saying it, that peace is possible, that it's not earned through perfection, it's chosen in presence and protected by values. So go live it. Not tomorrow, not someday, now. Let your steps be slow. Let your voice be steady. Let your life be the quiet roar of a man who knows who he is and never needs to prove it again. And when your life becomes that quiet roar, something sacred awakens. Not in the world, in you. You no longer move from pressure. You move from principle. You no longer seek clarity in others. You find it within. You no longer ask, "What do they think of me?" You ask, "Am I proud of who I'm becoming?" That shift, subtle, profound, rewrites everything. Your relationships deepen, not because you demand more, but because you show up with more presence, more patience, more truth. Your work becomes more meaningful, not because it suddenly changes, but because you do. You bring purpose into each task, not for status, but for alignment. Even your solitude stops feeling lonely. It becomes sacred, a space where you recharge, a space where you remember what matters. And this is where the Stoic path reveals its real reward. Not fame, not followers, but freedom. Freedom from chasing what never mattered. Freedom from being swayed by things outside your control. Freedom from the noise that once dictated your worth. You realize the world doesn't need another loud voice trying to dominate. It needs men who are deeply rooted, men who carry calm like armor, men who speak when necessary and live with integrity when it's not. That's you now. Not perfect, but present. Not above the chaos, but no longer consumed by it. And that's all that ever mattered. So keep walking, not to arrive somewhere new, but to return again and again to what's always been within you. Your truth, your strength, your stillness. Let the world chase the next trend. You live timelessly. That's the quiet power that echoes long after you're gone, and the life that leaves behind not just a legacy, but a light. And someday, someone will ask you how you did it, how you became so calm in a chaotic world, how you stood firm when others bent, how you walked through fire without burning out. They won't ask because you boasted. They'll ask because your life quietly taught them something they didn't know they were ready to learn. And when that moment comes, you won't need a speech. You won't need to prove anything. You'll simply tell the truth, the way you've always lived it. That you stopped performing, that you got tired of the noise, that you finally asked yourself, what would it look like to live in full alignment? And then you began, slowly, quietly, relentlessly, one honest decision at a time. One boundary, one breath, one moment of stillness in the middle of someone else's storm. And that was enough. Because you weren't chasing power, you were embodying it. You weren't demanding respect, you were living in a way that invited it. You weren't trying to be seen, but your presence made it impossible not to be. That's what they'll feel. That's what they'll remember. Not perfection, but presence. Not noise, but depth. Not control, but calm. So walk on. Let your life be your loudest message. Let your stillness ripple further than any shout ever could. Let the man you are becoming be the answer to every question you used to carry. And if you ever wonder whether this quiet path is enough, look around at the world and then look within. You'll know. This is not the easy road, but it is the only one that leads home. And when you finally arrive at that quiet place within, not as a destination, but as a way of being, you'll feel it. Not as a rush, not as a climax, but as a steady presence that no one can give or take away. It will feel like peace, but not the kind that waits for circumstances to align, the kind that stands unmoved when they don't. It will feel like freedom, but not from responsibility. Freedom within responsibility, because you chose it. It will feel like strength, but not the kind that needs to overpower, the kind that doesn't flinch, even when the ground shakes. And you'll understand, this was never about becoming someone new. It was always about returning to the quiet truth of who you already are. You were never meant to be loud to be heard. You were meant to be true to be remembered. You were never meant to chase admiration. You were meant to live with honor and let that speak for itself. And the echo of that life, a life lived in alignment, in presence, in peace, will carry further than any performance ever could. So take this with you. In a world full of noise, be still. In a world full of image, be real. In a world full of chasing, stand rooted. Because the man who lives like this, he doesn't need the world to know his name. His presence is enough. His life is the message, and his legacy will be carved quietly, deeply, and forever. And so your journey continues. Not toward applause, not toward validation, but inward. Each day a quiet practice, each moment a quiet choice, each step a quiet return to self. There will be days you feel unseen, good. That's where the real work happens. There will be days you feel misunderstood, good. That means you're no longer living for approval. There'll be days you wonder if any of it matters. It does. Not because the world says so, but because your life starts to feel different, lighter, cleaner, more peaceful, even in the hard seasons. That's when you'll know you've tapped into something rare, something the Stoics lived, something the world forgot, something you're now choosing again and again. You'll see it in the way you handle pressure, in the calm behind your eyes, in the steadiness of your presence when others fall apart. You'll see it in how you move, not rushed, not reactive, but rooted. You won't need to broadcast it. People will feel it. The quiet confidence, the inner calm, the strength that speaks without raising its voice. That's what Stoicism was always about. Not detachment, but deep connection to what truly matters. Not perfection, but the daily courage to return to your principles. Not performance, but presence. So here you are, not finished, but transformed. And from this moment on, you don't have to be anything. You just have to live it. Live slowly. Live clearly. Live truthfully. Because in the end, the man who lives in quiet alignment with himself is already free. And that freedom, it doesn't need an audience. It doesn't need permission. It doesn't need to be explained. It just is. You'll wake up with fewer questions and more clarity. You'll stop asking, what should I do to be enough? And start asking, what does it look like to honor who I already am? That shift, subtle as it may seem, is everything. Because now you're not striving, you're choosing. You're not reacting, you're responding. You're not chasing, you're creating, not for the world, but for the man who looks back at you in the mirror. He's the only one who truly knows the miles you've walked, the weight you've carried, the battles you've fought in silence. And now he sees you, standing here, still, strong, quiet, free. You've become the kind of man who no longer needs a map, because he's become the compass. And wherever you go next, whatever paths open, whatever storms rise, you'll walk with calm. Not because life got easier, but because you got clearer. This is your power now. Not in what you say, not in how you look, but in who you are, when nothing needs to be said at all. So keep walking the quiet road. It's not for everyone, but it's for you, and it leads exactly where you were meant to go. Back to yourself, back to peace, back to a life that doesn't just look good, but feels true.